I think we have one visitor who'd like to say something. Ramesh.
Well, thanks for your time. I kind of feel almost part of this team because all of you talked about 3 of my favorite topics. I was a member of the Diversity Advisory Board, and I was there for 2 of the Beaverton night markets this year. And you guys talked about scooter in Beaverton. I think the Beaverton downtown loop, people are looking at scooters for local districts. So that'll be another interesting topic that I'll be involved in later. Not that I like them, but I'm involved in that. And Maupin, I was there in Maupin this summer doing whitewater rafting on the July 4th weekend. So I'm part of this team. But the main purpose for me to ask you guys for a little time today is I speak as the vice chair of the Cultural Coalition of Washington County. This is the granting organization that gets funds from Oregon Cultural Trust and disburses that money to local cultural arts and community groups. I come here with 2 requests for this team. First one is we are looking to enroll some more members to the board. If any of you are interested, or if there is someone you know who might be interested, I'd like to get the word out. So after this meeting, I'll send the details to one of you in an email that you can probably pass it around. The second one is in the next few weeks, we will also be putting out applications for these grants themselves. And I'm asking this body to help me get the word across to your communities, your network, and to people who might be interested in getting some funds from the Oregon Cultural Trust for any arts, cultural, or community event itself. So those were my 2 requests. One is any interest in membership on the Cultural Coalition Board. And the second one is any interest in folks or teams who want to apply for the cultural grants. If I can have, who can I send that email to if I want to send you details? Can I send it to you, Chair?
Or probably Lani Parr.
Okay, okay. So Lani is when I've met her before, so she knows.
Does anyone have any questions or any ideas for grants maybe, or anyone that might want to join? Karen, you always have some good ideas.
I would like to be CC'd on that, Lani, or at least forward it to me. So the Beaverton Arts Commission and also the nonprofit gallery that I'm connected with, who has made, we've made application for grants as a nonprofit. So I would love that information.
That's true. Beaverton Arts Foundation has kind of been my mentor when I came on this board new. They told me what it's all about rather than me telling them, hey, what is this application? How do you get it? So, wonderful. Definitely, I'll take up that offer. And thank you so much, Sharon. I'll try and get in touch with you too.
Thank you.
I'll also add my email when I send you the details. Any questions or any comments, any concerns, please let me know. And I'll be happy to help both the organizations along, the Cultural Coalition and the BCCI. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, we'll follow up with Lani. Will have his contact information later. Okay. I don't think we have any other members of the public. We just have some City of Beaverton. So we can go to Allison Tivnon. You have until 7 o'clock. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Where to begin? Well, I am happy to share that Jenny Horuyama's very first day is today, serving as our permanent city manager. Kurt Wilson is staying on for the next city council meeting, which is tomorrow. He helped draft the agenda for that. Very grateful for the work that he did in his role, and are super excited to have Jenny on board. I've had a chance now to sit down with her and start to get to know her. I'm really looking forward to working with her and to seeing what she does with this new role. She's extremely accomplished and is also very responsive. So I think you'll enjoy meeting her if you get the opportunity, and I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to, though she's probably gonna be really busy for the next few weeks as she onboards. So speaking of the council meeting tomorrow, it is a roundtable meeting, which I had to get used to exactly what that meant. They function differently than the regular city council meetings. We're going to dive right into a couple of big topics. There is not a public comment period during this, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I just want to flag that for you, that you can tune into it, but there isn't one for this. We also don't, vote on ordinances or any of the other typical stuff that we do in city council meetings. The purpose of the roundtable meetings is to dig really deep on usually one or two topics. And we have two for tomorrow. One is on one of the recommendations that was put forth in the Human Rights Advisory Commission's report on police. And this one is on creating a police oversight committee. And that was definitely one we needed time to talk as a council and get lots of research and hear what other cities are doing, what's worked, what hasn't. So I would definitely tune in to hear about that and hear about the conversations that the council has. There's no votes tomorrow, so nothing is going to be set in stone, but I think you'll get an idea of where the council is kind of sitting in terms of deciding what direction to go in. And the other topic that we will be discussing is the ARPA funds and figuring out how to use them. And we've received a lot of input from the community. The mayor has had conversations with Washington County and other nearby cities. She's also talked to mayors in several other cities to figure out what they're doing with it. And the Diversity Advisory Board has also sent along a list of recommendations for prioritizing communities of color and economically vulnerable members of the community who've been impacted so deeply by the pandemic, as being, especially since a lot of the relief funds and efforts have gone more towards business and renter protections and eviction moratoriums, to make sure that they're a part of that conversation. And then lastly, as I'm sure all of you have been reading the news and watching the news about Afghanistan, it's been extremely heartbreaking and scary to see what's happening over there. We do have some Afghan families that are going to be arriving at Portland Airport, the first of several refugees that are trying to escape the country. And Portland, along with Seattle, have declared themselves to be sanctuary cities, and Beaverton, we're going to explore doing that as well. I think there will be a resolution going forward tomorrow to also make Beaverton a welcoming refuge for people that are escaping what's happening in Afghanistan. And as some of you may know, the mayor, she was in 1st Infantry as a combat medic in the Iraq War. And I believe she was over there around 2004 or so. Her husband is an officer in the Oregon National Guard. So he served in Afghanistan. And I'm sure she'll have some comments and thoughts on that tomorrow if you want to see what she has to say on the subject, since she's experienced it in ways that I personally haven't. So that's what's right out in front of us. There's several other things I could talk about, but I want to leave some room for questions and comments if anyone has any.
Birgit was up first.
Allison? Yeah.
I was first, Frosty.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
was
Go for it. Go for it. I'll go raise, I'll officially raise the hand then. There we go.
Hey, I thought we already are a sanctuary city.
We are, we absolutely are, but we're talking about making it directly tied to the refugees coming out of Afghanistan, and basically raising our hands, because there's going to be, I think, like 40,000 that have applied or will apply, that served the military over there as interpreters, engineers, others that were friendly to the military and are in danger. as well as their families. So there's a lot of cities around the country that just need to step up and say, we will figure out a way to make accommodations, whether that be through, partnering with different, short-term rental companies, looking for host families, and ultimately looking for housing options as well. So it's just to get really intentional about it and join the wave of cities that are trying to figure out how to make good on a lot of promises that were made to people that helped us.
Yeah, the only thing that I don't understand is because these guys, they are not in need of a sanctuary city, right? Because the sanctuary city is supposed to be for for illegal people to be not questioned, blah, 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 that whole thing, right? And while a refugee is a refugee, I mean, it's clear that they are refugees, most of them, like apart from the Taliban spies that we also will import, but that's okay. But the thing is, it's a refugee, right? So a refugee has a status. It's not like the non-status people. So it's not so special from the sanctuary point of view as my wondering here why they announced that as if that's a big deal. I mean, not us.
I think it's just a designated resettlement community, not so much sanctuary.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I hear too. But Seattle obviously made that a big deal, sounds like, and that's not really necessary. So anyway, just like kind of clarity. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Go ahead, Frosty.
Yeah, I served for 6 months on active duty. My hospital unit in Vancouver was called up, and a number of our folks went into the Gulf, and a bunch of us ended up in Europe that were going to be recycled between Europe, the Gulf, and then the States. That was in 1991. So I'm very familiar with what you're talking about, and I think we owe it to these people. I just hope they're vetted properly is all. My big concern about, and it's not really concern, but I would hope that we set standards for, and I have no problem with the police oversight, but I hope we set standards for it. And one of those standards, Allison, I think is imperative. Having gone through, and there's a number of people in this video or this meeting that have also done this. I went through both CERT and the Beaverton Police Academy, and having a nephew who's a police officer in Hillsborough, and I would hope every one of the members of the council, as well as the staff, administrative staff, also take the time to at least do ride-alongs and understand what we're putting our police in, because without getting too political here, we ask them to do things that most people wouldn't do under extremely stressful conditions. And until you walk a mile in their shoes, you better not open your mouth. And so, and that goes for first responders on the CERT side as well, because they face challenging situations with mental health issues, et cetera. So I would hope and would encourage you to make sure we set standards and not just have somebody who likes the police or hates the police that gives them the right to be on this committee.
Thank you. Yes, we are going to be extremely thoughtful in how this is crafted to make something that can be sustainable over time. Yeah. And to the point about a ride along, I actually am arranging one right now. I'm really excited about that. I wanted to do one as soon as I got elected, but with COVID, they had just kind of paused on things like that until very recently. So hopefully it doesn't get canceled again because of Delta. But I'm very much looking forward to that. And one thing I did not know is that the typical shift is 10 hours. And they said, you want to go for the whole thing? And, I might have to gird my loins a little for 10 hours, 10 out there. But
I rode along with a female officer, and I tell you, I wouldn't want to meet her in a dark alley. She was amazing. I mean, these people are, and we need them well trained, but these are good, and I'm glad we have them. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Jim. You have a question?
You're on mute, Jim.
There we go. I think I got it. I have a concern here too, and part of it is the mayor and she is very friendly with the group called Sunrise Beaverton, which I consider an outright terrorist group. And their goal is to abolish the police department, although they realize they probably can't do that, but then defund it. And I don't know what her exact opinions are on it, but they have put Sunrise, she has put Sunrise Beaverton on her Facebook page as with a whole bunch of other people. And I have some real concern that that's the way they want to go, is to defund the police and etc. And that's just, I notice on next door that when the police are brought up, there's a few people that are very radical, want to defund it, and then maybe 15 other people that want to keep them, like how they do it, and would like to have police show up when something happens. So I'm a little concerned which way the city's going on this. Anyway,
I can't speak to policy and how the other counselors would vote, but I can say I'm confident. And from a personal standpoint, defunding the police is not in the realm of reality for me. I think that we can examine what a police force looks like in this day and age and what mental health response looks like and where the funds are going. The police play an extremely important part in our community. And I won't go so far as to put words in the mouths of other counselors, but I will say that I feel very grateful to have these counselors to work with through this. I think we got a very thoughtful crew here that are coming at this from a lot of different perspectives, but that are going to take the community's input into account, study it from every single possible vantage point, and come up with something that will be sustainable going forward, and will keep our community safe.
Allison, does that include school resource officers? Because I think they're desperately needed.
School resource officers was also part of the HRAC recommendations, and it is a conversation that was due to happen. It's happening all over the country. Some are choosing to keep them, some are choosing not to, some are choosing to completely revamp what it looks like. And we have basically where the council is on it is we needed to know what Beaverton School District wanted to do. And they were in the middle of elections and getting new school board members in. And so about, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, Mark Sansucci and I were tapped to be the liaisons from the city council side. And there are 2 school board members that are working on their side. And we've come together to start working to create an RFP that is going to bring a third-party facilitator in that has done this before. We put out a national search to get someone in who has walked school districts, city councils, and other amalgams around this conversation in to study the data, to talk to the school board and the city council and create facilitated conversations with other stakeholders, including the police, including kids, including advocacy groups, to talk about it. And the goal is that by, I want to say spring of next year, maybe early winter, we're in the school district is in a position to make a call and then on what they want. And then the city of Beaverton would then decide if it's something that they're going to fund or not. It is absolutely not baked at this point, but we needed someone to help us navigate through this conversation because as you are all aware, I mean, there's a lot of opinions on this and they're all strong. And I think at the center of the whole thing are the kids and how are we keeping them safe? And what does that look like now? And so it's
now you need those school resource officers to enforce a mandatory mask policy in schools. So there's a lot going on all at once in our community and every community around all sorts of subjects. And having COVID on top of all of it has definitely made it more complex. But as far as the SRO process, I believe that we are going to have something of substance and tangible substance by the end of the year that will be something that's forward facing. I know that there will be all public meetings once we do get someone in. So it's not going to be a closed door process. It'll be very transparent.
All right, perfect timing. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Please feel free to email Allison. I'm sure she'd love to respond. good luck at the council meeting tomorrow night. And now we're going to Brian Martin for the tree code audit project. You have until 7:30. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint. Okay, I trust everybody can see that. Good. Okay. So I'm actually on the agenda twice tonight, but the first one is the tree code audit project. My name is Brian Martin. I'm the long range planning manager for the city. And I'm here to talk about this kind of small, compact, but a good start of a project to look at our policies and our codes around trees. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this. So here's the agenda. I really look forward to hearing from you at the end of this, but the steps I want to go through during this short presentation are to describe the project, the process we followed, some key findings from a tree code audit that we asked a consultant to do, followed by next steps and an opportunity for you to answer questions and ask questions. Okay, so the project introduction. Again, it's a pretty small and focused project because we had limited staff time and resources for this. But we'd already heard that it was important to a lot of community members to figure out kind of as we grow, as we develop, how do we include trees and nature in the city? So we knew it was on people's minds. So we crafted this to be a diagnosis. What's out there now with our tree policies and our tree rules, and what might be working and not working. So, and how we might improve it. So the project includes the audit I mentioned, and I think you all got a link to that in the agenda. Research on other communities' approaches is coming up, and then the consultant's going to identify some potential paths forward for the city. Not in the sense that we're gonna pick one, but just so we understand what's out there. What are other communities doing? What are the possibilities? What this project is not is a project to change the city's policies or our regulations. Again, we're doing kind of a light touch, students of homework diagnosis, so we understand where we're at. Later on, if the city leadership decides it's a priority to actually do an urban forestry project and change our policies and codes, we can do that project as well. Okay, so I just wanted to pause for a second in the introduction and say, and so everybody knows what I'm talking about when I talk about policies and codes, and what's going on with trees and our city. So first of all, the big context is that in our region, we have an urban growth boundary where we're trying to focus urban development inside cities, inside the urban growth boundary, and then help preserve farm and forest outside. I see some people on the screen squinting because it's very tiny, but this blue area here is Beaverton. That's our city boundary. So Hillsborough's over here, Portland's over this way. And then this white line is the urban growth boundary. So I know you were squinty from space here, but you can kind of see that this is more developed. There's a lot more houses here and commercial areas and industrial areas. And then out here, beyond the growth boundary, there's farms, there's orchards, there's vineyards, there's all sorts of agriculture going on out there. You can see the Tualatin River is all squiggly, kind of coming through here. When there's a line of trees, you can kind of see how it weaves its way down there. And then the Chehalem Mountains are over here. So it gets a lot more rural, a lot more agricultural, more trees, more natural areas, and then it just keeps going like that. So that's the context in which we find ourselves. We're trying to focus and intensify development inside to save the farms and forests outside, but there's a balance to be struck inside too, inside the urban growth boundary. Trees and nature have a lot of benefits, and they have a place in the city as well. Even from space, you can see that a little bit because there's these little squiggles here of green. So, the those trees were saved. They're preserved. It's probably streams there. There's probably natural areas there. So that's a benefit as well. All right, next slide. Get it to happen. There we go. So I'm going to show a couple of example locations. I don't mean in any way to pick on the developments that occurred here or single anybody out. These are really just two examples of a before and after picture. And it gives us an opportunity to think about how development and the trees interact and what balance of priorities we're dealing with. So this is a site in downtown Beaverton. It's at First and Lombard. The La Scala and Barcelona are here, developed here. Up here on the top is where all the restaurants are. There's a little plaza here. So this was the scene before in 2010. And then this aerial on the right is from 2019. So, you can see there were some trees that were removed for these developments. Looks like some trees over here were preserved on the edge. And what we ended up with was we have housing for folks on the right. We have jobs for folks. We have places to go to dinner. We have places to hang out here in the plaza. We have some, people got the chance to start businesses. There's a lot happening. We got a little parking, and we got downtown vibrancy and a lot of action, and an opportunity for people to live near transit. So, that's the kind of balance we're talking about. Like, how do we deal with wanting trees and nature in the city and getting all those benefits too? The other thing you can see on here a little bit is there's street trees planted. I think there's even some trees in the landscaping here. We've got some trees in this parking lot and on the plaza and pathway in the middle. Okay, so another quick example, residential neighborhoods where we all live, like most of them were nature before and now they're neighborhoods. So this is a recent one over along Shoals Ferry, closer to Mount Side High School. And then I did these backwards. So over here on the right is the 2010 and on the left is 2019. But we got houses for people here. Some of the trees on the outer part were removed. These buildings were removed and we got a new neighborhood. Street trees were planted along the street. And I was looking at Google Street View earlier today because I didn't have time to drive out. And there were some trees planted in some of the yards as well. Of course, those when they're just planted, they're a lot smaller. So we'll have to see over time how they grow and what that neighborhood looks like 10 or 15 years from now. So the process that we followed to do this small project was we hired Cascadia Partners, a consulting firm. They actually had a sub-consultant that's an arborist to look at our policies and rules around trees. So when those developments happen, what rules do they have to follow? And what's that mean for trees that remain or trees that are removed and trees that are planted? We did limited engagement, again, just because of the resource crunch. But we did talk with staff. We talked to a couple external customers, including a consulting firm that works with developers in the Park District. And we talked to some community members too, as I mentioned before, who were interested in trees. Okay, let's keep going. So some key findings of the audit the consultant did was that our policies don't necessarily provide clear direction for how trees should be handled during development and what roles trees play in the community. I think we recognize that trees have a lot of value. They can provide shade, they can cool areas, they provide wildlife habitat. They're beautiful. You can climb them. I mean, there's all sorts of benefits that trees have, but our policies and our comprehensive plan, even our development code, are maybe silent in some cases or not super clear about where's the city going with tree policy. And then some are outdated. I mean, the development code talks exclusively about aesthetics. And I think there's a lot of research and knowledge from the last few years that some of the other benefits that I mentioned are important as well. Other key points about the development rules include that some of the rules don't actually promote retention of a lot of trees during development, and often don't require mitigation if they are. So sometimes some other cities will say, and even sometimes Beaverton's code will say, if you have to remove those trees for your development, you can either plant new ones on site or off site, or pay a fee to compensate the city so we can plant trees somewhere else. There's also some outdated, imprecise, and incomplete inventories of significant trees or natural resource areas, which may mean that some trees aren't being protected, even if they are those important kinds of trees. Okay. And they also, the consultant also evaluated kind of how just how is it to use the code. There are some things that are working and some things that are either confusing or hard to find because they're in multiple different chapters of the documents. We have lots of different types of trees and lots of definitions for them. So sometimes folks have a little trouble keeping track if there's 11 different kinds of trees. Like, I don't understand which kind of tree this is and how it's what I'm supposed to do. So some things are unclear, and some issues aren't addressed. So 3 examples they mentioned were sometimes there's a tree regulated, but it's on the property line. And usually there's one property owner coming in for a development or a change, but then the trees on the property line, so it actually involves 2 property owners. It doesn't necessarily deal with that very well. Commercial logging isn't addressed. Wildfire resilience, especially on the edge of the city, is not addressed so much. Okay. The next steps is public comments are welcome. That's why I'm here. I'm hoping you can all spread the word. You can make your own comments, and you can spread the word to your friends and your neighbors. You can actually go to the website right now, take a look at the audit. There's a button on there where you can send comments to me. We want to make sure that other folks get their eyes on it, and we have the right diagnosis of how we're doing tree-wise. If we're going to take out comments till about mid-September, and then we'll produce a final report. Then the consultant will move on to those research best practices, kind of what other communities are doing, memo, and think about if the city decided to maybe preserve more trees or try to achieve something else, what other options do we have for tree code? And I've got the website on this page, and it's also on the next page. So again, we really want to hear your comments. I'm going to stop the presentation right there. You can go to the website to review the audit. Your friends can go there too and make comments. And my contact information is on the bottom there. So happy to answer questions or take comments. Thank you.
All right, I don't see anyone's hand raised. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Oh, go ahead, Connette.
Yes, I'm just wondering if they've investigated looking into actual measurement of the existing canopy with drones and things like that. Now that's now possible, very effectively possible.
Yeah, actually, they periodically have these planes fly over with lasers called, it's LiDAR data. I can't remember what it stands for. And they can measure the tree canopy pretty accurately that way. And we do have that data. I've actually been working with our geographical information systems folks to look at how that's changing over time. So we are taking that, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
That doesn't drill down though as far as what kind of trees are making up the canopy and or the health of the trees. That it would just be a 3,000 feet overview of existing canopy.
Yes, that's accurate. Our urban forestry folks are doing an inventory of the street trees. where they're actually doing what you're talking about, where what kind of tree is this, in good shape, where is it? And it's actually, I think, taking 4 years because there's so many street trees, but they're just chipping away at it.
Okay, Frosty is next, and then we'll go to Sharon.
I have the distinction, although I see some others that may be as old as I am. I lived through the Columbus Day storm in 1962. I was a freshman at Willamette University trying to get a biology degree, and also lived through, I think it was in the mid 80s. I was on the north side of the Highland Forest, and now I'm on the south side. And I see trees that are not in groups, which make them more vulnerable. And trees along, for example, Denny Road and Lombard, that are more along the oak line instead of the and deciduous line rather than the evergreen line. And particularly along Denny, you see the power lines going down the north side of Denny, and you see these huge trees that are actually bifurcated, I'm sure because of those electric wires that have caused them to split. And they just look dangerous. I've got to believe it's a huge job to do a true inventory of, I would say, potentially dangerous trees. And I know down Secretariat, I keep looking at the trees down there, and a good east wind storm would take them into houses. I have friends that live over in Durham that have had a number of trees fall on them and their houses that would actually kill people if they hit them. And even, you know, those trees down on Denny from 217 to Hall are huge, huge limbs. And it doesn't take much of a limb to kill somebody. And are we taking a look at that and seeing what trees should be pruned or trimmed or truly eliminated or replaced for safety purposes? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I think if we're talking about street trees, that inventory is definitely going to be paying attention to that. And I know the urban forestry folks actually take care of trees on certain streets, but not others. Others, the private property owners are responsible. Which brings us to the rest of the trees. The private property owners, the trees on private property are generally, it's up to the property owners to keep track of that. And the urban forestry folks are definitely.
But don't they have to get permits to take them down, even if they're dangerous?
I'm tempted.
I guess it depends on how bureaucratic a certain city is, or whatever, how many fees they want to collect.
Well, generally, if there's imminent danger, you can address it. But I honestly, Frosty, I don't want to give you the wrong answer. So I think I'd rather
drive down Denny Road and Lombard and take a look at those. They're really, when you think of it in that manner, they look really scary, although they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Some of it is in terms of permitting for a tree on private property is whether it's one of the designated falls into a category of a designated tree, like an historic tree, which there's only 5 of in all of the city of Beaverton, which I thought was interesting. And it was surprising to me, for example, that the big tree that's outside the door of the post office in Beaverton is not a historic tree, even though back at some point it was named Beaverton's favorite tree. But it's not a historic tree. And so there's different rules for how a tree is designated. If it's a street tree, you do have to get a permit to cut it down. But other than that, it would depend on if it's a designated certain kind of tree in the community. But if it's just the tree in my neighbor's backyard that blew over a section of fence, it was just between my neighbor and my husband and myself in terms of taking care of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely if you have a question about a tree, whether you can take it down, do you need a permit, you should definitely call the city and not me, because I'm running this project, but I don't do that review every day and talk to customers and answer their questions about trees. So I don't want to give you the right answer, but it does definitely matter which tree it is. Generally the larger trees well, the smaller trees are less of an issue. I think community trees, which are 10 inches or greater, you can remove 4 per year. But if, again, if you have questions or you're trying to figure out which process do I follow, we have folks standing by. We're happy to answer those questions.
Well, it'd be interesting to do an inventory of those types of trees and grade them as far as danger.
Well, that's a good point, and I have a comment, sort of question. When we moved in, we bought our house over 10 years ago. We didn't realize we have these 3 giant pin oaks in our front yard, and we thought they were wonderful. Well, they also had not been taken care of, and now it's a many $1,000 project every few years to get someone to professionally take care of them. And I do. Is the city aware that there might be people out, through no fault of their own, not through negligence, where it's a homeowner or a property owner that has trees that they know might not be safe, and what do you do there if you can't afford the many thousands of dollars for maintenance?
I would love to get back to you on that.
I have a little information on that.
Sure.
So we have a very active tree planting program in Highland, and if it's a private tree, you're allowed to take it down, unless, as Debbie said, that has some designated significance. And even then, if it's on private property, you're able to do that. The city has an arborist that will make recommendations about replacement trees, and in some cases even come out and evaluate your tree. I know they suggest that we've had an arborist come out and look at our trees, and the suggestion is you don't use the same arborist to take the tree down as you would to evaluate the tree, because there are a lot of not aligned incentives when that happens. But it's an important question. There's a lot of people that move into this area that aren't comfortable or haven't been around some of these larger trees. And a lot of trees are actually fairly, especially the firs, are fairly young, because this whole area was timbered back in the 20s. But we understand people need to be comfortable with what's in their yard and what they're able to maintain. So we have developed a free tree program where we will help with planting instructions and providing our city arborist approved tree for either the strips or for yards. And it's been people, what we find is people will take down a tree because they're worried about it, but not replace it. And so that's what that program is aimed at.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. I'm so glad that's working for you.
Yeah.
Slight different thing with my trees, like as expensive as they are to maintain, it would probably be twice or triple that amount to actually take them down, because they are so big. So that provides, we were worried when we were barely moving in 2008, when the economy was not so great. We were worried to have anyone come out and look at them, because we didn't want to be aware of a liability that we maybe couldn't do anything about. So enough about my trees. Any other questions for Brian? Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
So a couple of things. One is, I'm sure that Jared is really swamped as the arborist, and I would invite people to invite him to NAC meetings, because he's great. Couple of things. One is that I think it was when I was on Planning Commission, Barbara Fryer took us, the group of us, around the city to look at significant tree. It was a tour, and it was an eye-opener. And I know that one of my neighbors, Kevin Teller, saved a grove of trees on Beard between Murray and 155th because of the work that he did on his own behalf, which I'm hoping to have named for him. The questions I have are, I live on the wetland of Beaverton, Johnson Creek and Sexton Mountain, and Portland State has a program that was beneficial to us where they were planting basking logs, snags, indigenous plants, riparian wetland project. It was fabulous. Is that something that can be a partnership for either PCC and their landscape program? I went to landscape architecture at U of O way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, but and became something else. But also offsite mitigation, whether that is still something that is utilized in development as opposed to on-site mitigation. And then the tree health, one of our NAC members had come up with some concerns about some of the vegetation in the wetlands and around the town because of the heat dome has really taken a hit. And whether or not that's being assessed and addressed, you know, so I know that the I'm all over the map here because I wrote down a whole bunch of notes of things that I was concerned about. The comp plan, I know, you know, with street trees and groves, etc. And I was, I was going to call out on purpose Highland for the work that they do with trees. And I think that other NACs could be doing the same thing to contribute toward what Brian and this program is doing with some direction from the city. So I'm going to be quiet now.
Well, there was a lot there. I will say Jared is great. And he's helping with this project. Because you can tell he knows more about this than I do. He enjoys working with the neighborhood associations. And I think it's a great partnership because you know, you all can just work with your neighbors and talk about this and kind of organize way more than just Jared could. So that's fantastic. The wetlands, do you know if those are, you know, who owns those? Is that the homeowners association or CWS or
THPRD oversees the ones that are Beacon Hill.
Okay.
And that's right by Sexton Mountain School.
All right.
And so they work in partnership. And then I was also going to mention one other thing, and that's the Friends of Trees. Mm-hmm. They have been a really good resource. And we had Jared and Friends of Trees come to our NAC sort of as a 1-2 punch about trees and neighborhoods.
Yeah, great. So I can try to track some of that down, see what THPRD is up to with the natural areas. I'm sure they're concerned about that too, but I just don't have off the top of my head what's the status there.
We can definitely talk offline.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, give me a buzz.
All right, I'm gonna shut. Oh, Terry, did you have one last thing?
Just, I'll be brief.
Oh,
thanks. Yeah, since I didn't get to participate in the Planning Commission meeting on this, I guess my thought is that hasn't come up yet is that I think, first of all, trees older trees, established trees, which I am squarely in the realm of tree preservation, if we can. At property boundaries, oftentimes a grove may just be, 5 or 6 trees. It doesn't have to be 30 or 40. And I think protecting trees in groves help this wind throw problem when a couple of them are removed. And so, for example, in my backyard, I have a lot of big trees and I have a stormwater easement, and they grow like it's a stream. So even though there's a sewer line there are trees. So I think certain easements might be, even when they're not a stream, this is a stormwater area, they grow some nice trees. And so I think that there might be other places where we could sneak some trees in, and maybe even under electric lines, if you can promote the 12 to 15 foot tall tree, most of those will exist under an easement line and not interfere with the purpose of that easement. So that's what I would like to see is more consideration of using some of our public easements to protect and grow trees that can coexist with the purpose of those easements. So thanks.
Great.
And one last thing, Bonneville Power, those big transmission lines, they actually run helicopters to do danger tree analysis. So that part is taken care of by BPA. And that was to Frosty, I think he mentioned something about that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Okay, one more thing from Eric before we switch gears. We can't hear you, Eric. Nope, can't hear you. We're gonna have to come back to you. Sorry about that. All right, Brian, we'll switch gears over to you again for the shelter code project, and you have half an hour until 8 o'clock. Go ahead.
Okay, switching gears. Okay. Can everyone see the new one? No, I need to share my screen. I know how to do this. Okay. There we go. Thank you. All right, so one of our associate planners, Jenna Hughes, is doing the project management for this. She's leading the project, but she couldn't be here tonight. She actually is performing her civic duty in another way because she's on jury duty all month. So I'm gonna do my best to represent the project and hear what your thoughts on it. So, and this is another one that's kind of at the beginning, so you can kind of follow along as we go if you'd like. So the shelter code project really is just thinking about how homelessness and the need to assist people experiencing homelessness are issues in the community. They're not new, but the need has significantly increased in the past few years, and especially during the pandemic. So this is a problem all over the region and the country, and shelters are often play an important role in supporting those who don't have permanent housing. They're also used for a lot of different situations. I already mentioned homelessness, but there's also victims of domestic violence or people displaced by a wildfire or other disasters, and the whole, on and on. So I'm here to talk about this new project that aims to determine where and how shelters are allowed in Beaverton. So the plan is to just give a brief overview of the project, and then we can have a discussion and we can talk about how we can ensure an equitable approach to shelters and what other factors we should take into account as we're doing the project. Okay. So this project will consider different types of shelters, including emergency shelters, severe weather shelters, and permanent year-round. So emergency is more in the crisis mode type shelter. Severe weather we've been doing, during the cold months, during the hot events and cold events. And then there's permanent shelters or year-round shelters, kind of two different ways to think about it. For people, generally the shelter's going all year, but there's different people interacting with it and using it. And the idea is to get them transitioned to permanent situations. So a little bit about what we've heard in the past few years. The city's diversity, equity, and inclusion plan has a statement about supporting year-round shelter. The community vision calls for reducing and preventing homelessness and providing temporary shelters. So it's been on the community's mind in various ways. And the city's comprehensive plan supports regional efforts to combat homelessness and provide a continuum of care. And supports emergency and transitional housing options such as shelters. So those are some of the policies that have been set in the past in the city. So our current rules for shelters are not necessarily completely sufficient to meet the goals that we just talked about in that previous slide. The code allows emergency and severe weather shelters, but the year-round shelters that are not, emergency based are not defined or addressed in the development code, which means the code does not allow them. So one other bit of context is currently there's a state law where the city must allow shelters, must approve shelter applications until July 1st, 2022. So it provides a short-term path for approving the projects, but the development code change that this project is talking about is thinking about the long term and how shelters will be reviewed after July 1st, 2022. So the project will explore updating the code to clearly define permanent or year-round shelters, clarify where and how they should be allowed in Beaverton, and make improvements as needed on how our code currently handles emergency and severe weather shelters. We're working with a consultant led by David Evans Associates, a team led by David Evans Associates to assist with conducting research and analysis and doing some interviews of shelter providers in Washington County and other communities. As a best practice, the project will include an equity analysis that uses the Government Alliance on Race and Equity toolkit to create a culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and equitable approach to shelters that aims to maximize benefits and eliminate burdens for Black, Indigenous, and all people of color. We'll also use an intersectional lens to extend benefits to other disproportionately represented in our homeless population and most at risk of chronic homelessness. And I think the list of, I won't read that to you, the list of folks on that could be experiencing homelessness or involved in one of the other types of shelters as well, that we mentioned earlier. The project timeline, there's 3 main phases. The first phase where we're at now is focused on research and analysis. It will result in a code analysis to understand how we're doing right now. Research, but this is going to sound a little bit like the tree code thing I talked about earlier, but research where we are now, research best practices for shelters, including looking at case studies in other cities and various shelter models. And then conduct public engagement, looking for opportunities for the general public to weigh in, receive project updates at every stage of the project. More focused engagement with service providers, as I mentioned earlier, doing interviews with them. So we can talk to people who are serving people experiencing homelessness or represent them, and various community groups, including those committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the current phase of engagement is focused on defining issues and opportunities associated with allowing better. So we're just doing our homework, essentially, making sure we hear from folks and understand the situation. Once the research and analysis is complete, we'll share what we've learned. And then we'll need help from the community with analyzing the alternatives and figuring out the best path forward. The idea is to bring proposed shelter-related development code changes to Planning Commission and City Council in the spring. So with that, and I see people like taking notes furiously, so I can get this PowerPoint to Lani to do if that helps folks. The discussion really is, do you see any issues or opportunities with allowing shelters in Beaverton? For example, with location, design, priority population, how they operate, the effect on nearby businesses and residences? Or do you have any other questions or comments? I'll wrap up there and I look forward to hearing.
It looks like Sharon had a question come through the chat. What is the city's plan to relocate the severe weather shelter when the BCC is torn down for development?
My understanding. Oh, sorry. My understanding is that process is ongoing. There are folks working on trying to find another suitable location as we speak. There's not really anything location-wise to reveal yet. That that you always have to find a spot and make sure like everything's set before you can actually talk about the spot. But we're definitely it's a priority to make sure that there's a new.
So Brian, the thing I fear is that when Far West Fibers on Denny down by 217 got shut down and the city was working on getting another location, which I don't think that ever happened. That's the thing that I fear with the tearing down of this and saying that there will be some a future consideration for another location. And I think Allison, did you have your hand up?
Ryan, do you mind if I come in and speak to this one?
Please.
Okay, so you're absolutely right that there, with the project C as it used to be known, the Senior Affordable Housing Project, it's displacing a few things, including the severe weather shelter. And nothing goes forward with that project until we have something lined up to fill that need. And I know right now, yes, there's not a lot available in terms of properties all across the city, across anything really these days, if you're trying to buy a house or if you're looking to have a place for something like this. But I do know that there's conversations happening with faith-based organizations all throughout the city, which should have been part of our toolkit for emergency sheltering anyway. And so I know those are ongoing, and site locations are also being looked at as well.
I'm glad to hear that it's front-ended instead of back-ended. And I did go on a tour of both the Beaverton Community Center shelter and also Elsie Stir, which was run by somebody else. And it was clearly very different in how they were done, but very necessary. Thank you.
Okay, Connette, and then anyone else have a question, use the raise hand feature so I can get you on the list.
Just a comment on one of the issues that will be important to address as we're attempting to house people is that we need wraparound services for especially the ones that are the most vulnerable and most difficult to house. We are mental health and public transportation and medical care and those kinds of things will be critical to keeping some people's housed.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Frosty.
No, I just changed my mind. I don't need a comment.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Ellen, can you hear me now?
Yes, I'll put you ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. Well, Brian, thank you for this presentation. I serve on the Washington County Housing Advisory Council, and I would appreciate it if you'd reach out to them for a presentation to them on this subject because of what's happening in Beaverton. The Housing Advisory Council has been responsible for buying a couple of motels in Aloha and Hillsborough and using them as homeless or houseless or I guess disadvantaged shelters. And it goes to the point of what Connette was talking about too, in providing the services that these people so desperately need. In addition to their shelter needs, they need mental health, they need substance abuse treatment, they need all kinds of help. So if we can work on that here in Beaverton, that's great. It's too bad we have to disrupt a lot of what we already have going now, but the only constant in life is change.
Thanks, Eric. That's a good idea.
All right, go ahead, Deborah.
Two things. First, just a comment that so I'm glad to hear that the Fifth Street Project C, whatever it's it's being called now, won't move ahead until an alternative location is found. That the shelter got placed there a few years ago after the shelter that was hosted by Parkside Fellowship, what was then Beaverton First Baptist Church, had run an emergency shelter. I volunteered there for a number of years. The church opted to not continue that, partly because of safety issues. And for a couple of years, there was no emergency shelter within the city limits of Beaverton. So I'm glad that faith communities are being reached out to, considered. But it ended up at the Beaverton Community Center because no other faith community was willing to be the host. The second thing is wondering if the safe parking program is still a piece of any kind of shelter preventing homelessness discussion, and an expansion of that, continuation of that.
It is still a part of the overall toolkit, I guess. And I also want to address this in terms of Sharon's question about family promise too, because I think they're both related. So we have all different sorts of folks that find themselves without a roof over their head. Some do have cars, and the safe parking program went into effect, I think it was 2 years ago now. And there's several locations that are identified around the city. They are up and running, and we see folks using them. And I know that there's like good neighbor agreements in place with folks that are either living nearby or working nearby. I'm not aware of any complaints around that. That's risen to the level where they're alerting the council about it. That's one. And then as far as family promise goes, from what I understand from all the research I've been doing on this topic, we've got Home Plate, we have Family Promise, we have several different types of organizations, nonprofits that work with people experiencing homelessness, but they're all fairly specialized. So we have homeless youth, we have families with children, we have domestic abuse survivors. Those are much more confidential in terms of location and whatnot. But we nowhere in Washington County is there a permanent shelter that's for folks that just need to come in off the street and aren't under the age of 18, do not have families. The children with them are not domestic abuse survivors. So you've got men, you've got seniors, you've got people with pets, and all sorts of other folks that don't quite fit into the category to utilize the services that we presently have. So that's I think what, now that the severe weather shelter, it's been put into the situation of, well, do we just find another location and keep it status quo, or do we use this as an opportunity to make some advancements on the DEI plan and in the overall community vision for the city of Beaverton? And the last thing I'll say about it is that Washington County, if you heard this in the news, has voted unanimously to create a center of addiction. They do not have a site for that yet, but there are going to be funds coming from like the cannabis tax, and I can't remember the monies that they would get, some sort of like fund, the mental health, like set aside fund that's going to go towards it. But because we don't have any sobering beds anywhere in Washington County. So there's a lot of different things that are happening in this space, not to equate addiction with homelessness, but there's definitely wraparound services that need to be put into effect, mental health support, and then just housing and figuring out how to provide that transitional housing as well.
Called the CAT Center, CATT, Center for Addiction Treatment and Triage. And it's a grand idea. And you're right, finding a place to house it is really going to be hard to do.
All right, we'll go to Birgit. Go ahead.
Okay. First question was about the that program, that pilot program of parking somewhere. It was a pilot program and it was a trial program that should have ended a year ago. And I mean, it was possibly extended because of whatever the reason, but what is it now a program that is continuing because it was so successful, and what were the successful success goals or parameters that were reached? That's my first question. The other question is faith-based places. That was already didn't work because of security, right? I mean, I know exactly what I think Connect was, no, whoever was talking about. Oh no, Deborah said that, right? That was a big issue. So how is that going to be different if we ask faith-based places this time to help with this? So that's it.
Well, to the first one, as far as parking goes, if there was a decision made, it has not been since I joined the council on making it permanent. I don't see it going away, especially right now with the pandemic. Anything that is helping people to be safe at night, and to park their cars in places that are not going to be right next to front entrances of businesses and the areas that were prompting the concerns in the first place about where the vehicles were parked. But it's also just to have a safe space at night. And it's from, as far as metrics for success for that, I think it's that people are utilizing it appropriately. They're going by the guidelines of the good neighbor agreements. They're going in and out at the times that they're sanctioned for it, and that there's no activities that are happening on the sites that go against those agreements that everyone is agreeing to.
Let me just add to this one thing, but it was a pilot thing. And so what I think is important is that the city keeps their word, and also then announcing when it's not a pilot and not kind of like letting it slip in, I mean, that's just not okay. I understand there is a lot of stuff going on because of COVID, but it might be something to just, it is fine if it is permanent, at least from my perspective, but that needs to be addressed. Like you want to be straightforward about it. Sorry, that's all.
Yeah, and it might have been, a lot of stuff happens in the city council meetings, and it's the only place where the news comes out, and if you blink, you miss it. So I'll look into it and get back to the group with an answer on that. Second question, trying to remember what the
security and the faith-based, what's the difference?
Okay, so the faith-based option is not to replace the idea of having a permanent shelter. It's to create additional resources in the event of major emergencies. So the permanent shelter serves as something that is absolutely needed. And the folks that would be operating it would be Washington County, with specialists that would, be working in the space and understand the intersections between the surrounding land uses, how to keep everybody safe, and establishing what behavior is expected when you're at the shelter and whatnot. I think having resources in the community, in the faith-based portions of the city, as well as exploring everything, is what happens in an earthquake, what happens if there's some other kind of major event and we need to have shelter space. And it was something that I raised during a recent meeting to say this has to be something we have regardless. And so I don't know exactly what that looks like, but the conversations are happening, and it sounds like they already exist in a lot of other cities. And it's just something that's kind of missing right now in Beaverton. That's
And it could just be revitalizing those and reinvigorating those relationships, and just understanding what the options could be should we ever need to have something like that.
All right, we'll take our last question from Connect. Go ahead.
You're on mute.
I said just a comment, and I think Allison's touching upon this, and that's about this coordination of funding sources. And we have what I've seen in this the social services arena in the last decades or so is that we're moving more and more toward relying on nonprofits to provide all these services, and sometimes that does not result in a secure, because source of funding for nonprofits come and go. Sometimes there is a mosaic of services that aren't always that well coordinated. So I guess my comment is that where as the government that we need to step in, and whether that's city of Beaverton or something like the Metro type of organization, it needs to be part of the consideration. This is long-term, difficult and complicated stuff to house people that are not ideally houseable. So thank you for trying, Kate. Allison. It's going to be a big piece of what you do, I think.
It's definitely been an interesting first year serving on council, a lot of topics. And Brian, thank you. I didn't mean to jump in and take over your portion.
I think I should take you everywhere, because I would have had to say, I'll get back to you on that on a bunch of stuff. So I appreciate your help.
Anytime.
All right, any other questions or comments? I was going to say great teamwork, Allison and Brian. You both stepped in and covered the whole thing, and now I think we have less follow-up to do. So kudos to both of you. Well done. Okay, well, you can hang out. You can hang out, or you can go on with your evening. Thanks for talking to us for an hour. Now I think we go to the consent agenda for the June minutes. Does anyone have any questions, comments, amendments for the June minutes? I don't see anyone. Okay, is there a movement to accept the June minutes as written?
I move we accept the June minutes as written.
Thank you, Eric. Is there a second?
I'll second.
That was the other Eric? Second, okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those in favor of accepting the June minutes as written. The motion carries. Thank you all. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to Lani for the City Services Department, City Update.
Great, thanks. Well, I just have a couple quick updates. One is, if you haven't already signed up for the Notify Me for city events information, it's really easy to do, and I just put it in the chat how to do that. And it's a great way to find out the latest information about our upcoming events, and if there's any event changes. As you know, with Night Market, we had to cancel Friday night. You would get the breaking news on that detail. So it's just a great tool to have for having all the information at your fingertips. And we have so many events going on that sometimes I know it's probably challenging to kind of keep track of it all. So check that out and sign up if you haven't already. And in a similar vein, I think we're just realizing that it's also helpful to have more tools when it comes to being aware or having alerts for different emergencies and whatnot. And so there's a variety of ways you can get notified, and the state has come out with a new system, and I also added that into the chat, how you can go ahead and sign up by texting your zip code to the text number, or you can go onto the website or download the app. And that way you're going to get the alerts from the statewide emergency system that way. Or there's also, the county has also a great system. So Washington County has, I guess, I was just thinking about this. I'm not sure. I think the best way is to go through the statewide system, but know that Washington County, as well as our own emergency management from the city of Beaverton, we have helpful tips on both of our websites where you can get helpful tools and information. And I think just by looking in those 3 areas, that will help you be ready for what might be coming down the pipeline. You know, we're anticipating probably, unfortunately, a dangerous wildfire season, you know, and also who knows what else may be happening, even with hot weather or severe weather updates, you would get those sort of updates. And I think lastly, I just want to mention that for the voters forum, marketing items, I don't want to steal any thunder away from what Eric's going to share with you, but we have some marketing pieces that we really just want to email. I'm going to email out to you today, or actually I'll probably wait till tomorrow to include it with all the other presentation information, but it will be essentially an email and a Facebook post and some other information that you can just share with your networks, because this really is the time to start sharing getting the word out about the September 9th voters forum. So those are my updates. Any questions? Thanks.
All right, thank you, Lani. Now I just wanted to talk really quickly about the upcoming elections. I will be termed out of chair, so we're going to need a new chair, and those elections will be in December. And we'll also need a new vice chair. And so I was just, does anybody have any questions, any comments, it's an awesome job. Like, doing the introduction to the voters forums has been one of the greatest things I've ever done, working with Lani. Okay, just put that out there. Anything else to add, Lani?
Just that I make it super, I'm super helpful as your person behind the scenes. So do not be afraid of the time commitment. I work with whatever you are willing to bring to the table, and we work as a good team. So do not let that hold you back if you're concerned about time commitment or what does it look like. Don't let that deter you. We will navigate it.
It's a no stress job.
I just want to make I want to make a comment and a thanks to the current board. Ellen, you've done a stellar job. I mean, really, and I think that really with the advent of the leadership planning that is kind of new as of maybe this year, to help guide the agenda setting and the progress through the year. I think that has been just a wonderful addition. So thank you to all of those who have stepped forward.
Thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate that. This is one of the highlights right now. Okay, anything else on elections? Then we're going to go to subcommittee.
As a past chair 3 times, I can say, Ellen, you're the best chair I've ever worked with. No doubt about it. And Lani does make it really easy. So if any of you are considering being chair, man, the job is a cakewalk when Lani's involved. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing is that we rewrote the bylaws, and I hope council gets around to approving them one of these days, but we've streamlined the election process as well. So it's all good.
Great job, Ellen.
Is that actually already, yeah, it's already gonna go with the bylaws?
Started the process, and September 7th will be the final piece for the bylaws.
This year we will elect with those bylaws.
Elect with those, yes, those bylaws will be in effect by then, yes.
Yeah, that's okay, great. Awesome.
Okay, thank you everyone for your comments. Really appreciate it. I'll turn it over to Eric with the event subcommittee. We can talk about the voters forum.
I'll be very quick. We have some dates and you probably ought to put them on your calendars. The last day to register to vote is August 31st. The ballots will go out September 1st for the special election that will be held on September the 21st. On September 2nd, the deadline for submitting questions for the voters forum comes up. So if you have questions, if your NAC has questions, if your mother has questions, send them in to Lani and we can get them. We have to have them by September the 2nd. And then the voters forum will be on September the 9th from 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock p.m. And it will be a live virtual event. What do I mean by that? Well, the candidates, the moderator, and our two stellar timekeepers, Ms. Lawler and Ms. Dunham, will all be in City Council chambers along with Lani and Franziska. And we will be separated by miles of plexiglass, but we will be live in council chambers. We've already set up the physical arrangements. Lani's gotten a clearance from the city manager's office. And then BCCI will use the system that's currently in place to televise city council meetings, to televise the voters forum. You should have by now, if you haven't, you will very soon, receive a postcard in the mail that will tell everybody about the voters forum. And on the back, there's an invitation to join a board or commission in the city of Beaverton. And I think you'll all recognize that handsome man right there with the BCCI t-shirt. Mr. Singh posed very graciously for that. So take a look for that. And don't forget, as Lani said, to share all of this information on your networks. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your mother that the voters forum is going to be on September the 9th. And don't forget to get your questions in. Thank you.
Is there anyone here that is not registered to vote that is able to vote? For just a little public, encouragement. Okay, good. I'm proud of you guys. Way to go, BCCI.
I failed to mention one thing. Ellen decided that she didn't want to do the intro this time around, even though she enjoyed it so much the last time. But Bintu has decided to step into the fore, and she's going to be working with TVC TV tomorrow to record the intro for the voters forum, in addition to doing a public service announcement that will air on TVC TV all between now and September 9th. So Bintu, smile.
Thank you very much, Bintu. Any other questions about events? Okay, we'll go to Terry for the land use subcommittee update.
Well, the land use subcommittee has been taking a summer break. And so we have no new reports, but we're going to get back into the swing of things in September.
All right, any questions for land use? Okay, we'll move over to traffic calming with Connect. Go ahead.
This is a report on that July 1st meeting we had with the Traffic Commission. And I'm happy to say that they spent the meeting reviewing the voting process and did change the voting process so that now the final traffic calming project vote is 51% of designated voters. And they are also going to omit including non-return votes as a no vote in the reporting out of the vote. The city engineer is working on putting that into a procedural form, and we expect it to be approved at the next meeting. That at that time, they'll also look at the 5 focused areas that the NAC feedback indicated was of concern. There are things like expanding designs, options, and financial support, addressing hotspots without having to do a full traffic calming project, and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to say that that work will carry on, and we'll disband our traffic commission, our traffic calming work group, unless in the future there's some more that we work we need them to do. And then I just wanted to report on a Highland project that was an outcome of the traffic agenda, and that is that Highland neighborhood is working on a back to school traffic safety event. And we are as part of that event, we have a number of activities. One is we're sending out a reminder to the whole neighborhood that school will be back in session and to take care with driving. We're working with Safe Routes Back to School to provide yard signs. They've ordered 50 of them. We'll try to get them into people's yards, especially targeting the critical routes to school, the problematic kind of areas in the areas closest to school. And we are also going to do a corner greeter project where on the first 4 days of school, volunteers will be on the sidewalks with signs, getting the driver's attention and reminding them as they come by the school that kids are back and to be mindful. So that's what I have.
I'd just like to point out that policy change never would have happened if it wasn't for all of Connect's hard work and persistence. So great job, Connect.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I was going to say yet another instance where Highland is taking the lead on something that should be standard in every NAC. So again, well done.
Oh, I did want to mention, if you're from Central or West, I think, and want to participate, it's for, we're working specifically with Fir Grove School. And Fir Grove District goes into those NAC areas. So if you're interested, contact me.
Well done. And since we're a little bit ahead of schedule, is there anything else happening in the NACs that anyone wants to report out?
What about the matching fund?
Yeah, well, I haven't forgotten about you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay, everybody on notice. After Birgit goes, then if anybody has any NAC related news, we will have time for that. So go ahead on matching grants, Birgit.
Okay, now that I'm really ready. Okay, great. So we had a meeting and we had two great projects that we approved. One was the the tree planting from Highland, and that was just it's a great example. And the other one was La Strada de Pastelli, and I think I heard somebody sharing a little bit about it, and we were very excited about supporting that. And I wanted to just, I don't know if anybody saw this, but they sent us this great, can I share? Yeah, okay, great. So I want to just share that poster if you hadn't seen that. And they sent this out. They did a really great preparation for it. It's the painting on the chalk art festival, painting on the floors, and they did this again. And was that Sharon who was involved in that? I heard, or no? Yeah.
Yeah, and these are old photos, and
Yeah,
I have the new ones, and they will be eradicated in the next few days. So if you have a chance to go down on First Street between Watson and just beyond Hall, please go down and look. There are lovely, lovely, wonderful people who've come in from all over out of town to do these. They're professional artists and stunning work.
First and Tucker.
I think it is Tucker, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so anyway, that's our report. It was awesome. So.
All right, any questions about matching grants? Oh, Frosty, go ahead.
Not matching grants, but I was on the grant committee, so I think we're done, right, Birgit?
We are.
Yeah, I heard that, is Beaverton High School going to be torn down and rebuilt? Allison, do you know?
I have not heard about that.
I heard it from a fairly reliable source and I just can't remember what it was, but
It's under consideration, Frosty. It's one of
Yeah.
those projects that the school board has been looking at. They had a special committee and I served on it to look
Mhm.
at all the projects that need money for maintenance of schools. And very soon, I'm sure the school board will be bringing to you for your viewing pleasure some kind of a bond measure that will include a redefinition of Beaverton High School along with several other schools like
Yeah.
Raleigh Park or Raleigh Hills.
yeah, our
McKay.
viewing and tax pleasure. Yep. No, my daughters went there and my stepfather went there, but that was back in the 50s, 40s. So yeah, it's an old school. So
It's only been there over 100 years.
yeah, right.
It's 19th century technology in the 21st century.
Yeah,
It's,
I think Richard went there, back in those days.
yeah, it's a great building if you like to freeze.
Yeah. I'm just curious because it would be a big, well, probably needed and it'd be a big improvement. So
Well, I'd stay tuned if I were you.
oh, we
As
will.
Allison said, there's a new school board. It's a completely different group of people now, so they're going to look at things with a different lens.
Yeah,
And on a related topic, some of the historic trees of the 5 in Beaverton are at Merle Davies School. So
yeah, and I think we're starting to see some increasing inequities forming around, you've got these amazing new schools like Mountain View High School and aging schools that just can't compete in terms of the technology that's literally built into the buildings.
That's Mountainside. Mountain View's out in Hillsborough.
Mountainside, yes. And I knew I was going to get that wrong.
It's
when I was
okay.
saying
It's
it. But one other thing is working on a constrained site like that to replace a school is not an easy process, especially when it abuts next to residents and small streets. And I'm sure it would be multi-phased and keeping kids safe.
state highways.
Highways.
Allison, I just wish
Yeah.
you wouldn't have jumped to inequity right away. This is a process where you have to replace these schools every now and then. And, when you have growth outside that needs that. So, but just don't assume everything's inequity.
Well,
We'll get to it.
we will get to
Yeah.
a place where it truly is inequitable if we're not prioritizing it to make sure that we're pulling the other schools.
Please don't assume that we want inequities.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not the assumption.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. Thanks.
Now, Allison, I get where you're coming from. And I will say that when my kids were going to Beaverton High School, they were on the cusp between Southridge and Beaverton. I was glad that they went to Beaverton because of the programming. It's not about the building. It's about the program.
Bingo.
And the staff.
Well, that's the program. Yeah.
That's part of
All
the
of the above.
program. Yeah.
Just because you have a new building doesn't mean it's great.
Yeah, well,
there
that building there is ugly. That the wall from Pink Floyd comes to mind. That new thing.
Oh, Birgit, we have to have lunch sometime.
There
I
is a Mountain
The Rolling
View-
Stones
there's a
concert
Mountain
out
View
there.
Middle School in Beaverton.
I wanted to ask Beatrice if she had, I know I saw your hand raised and then you put it down. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, I just wanted to say that last week I helped lead some tours at Beaverton High School. I'm going to be a senior there. And, the fire that happened on January 2020, there's a whole new mindfulness room. And it's really exciting because there's a new mindfulness class that's going to be taught. And I'm going to take that hopefully this year. So there's lots of new things, especially we've gained a lot since the fire. And I'm really excited to see all the new things that can happen within that mindfulness section.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Beatrice, you
perspective.
might want to
Someone-
reach out to OHSU because there's some research on mindfulness that came out of OHSU that could maybe enter into that program.
Go Beavers, Beatrice.
Thank you.
No, Beavers are Oregon State. She said OHSU.
But Beaverton High School are the Beavers.
Anything else from any of the NAC?
Right.
Questions, comments? Okay, then once again, we'll turn it over to Sharon for actionable items, and then we'll get out of here. Go ahead.
I used my little thing that we got. Thank you, everyone who put together I ate those nuts and treats and stuff during this meeting. But I am going to run through these as fast as I can. Thanks to our guest, Ramesh Krishnamurthy, and he has asked that he gets consideration for members to the board for the Cultural Coalition or for any of the grants of the Oregon Cultural Trust. I hope I got that right. And then Allison, you were talking specifically about the city council meeting tomorrow, which there's no vote, but you can watch, and it's a roundtable meeting about HRAC and the police oversight and ARPA funds. Also about consideration for a sanctuary city status for the Afghan refugees, which is fabulous. Then Brian walked us through the tree code audit project. So any comments you should send to him, and I think he needs them by mid-September. He also spoke on Jenna Hughes' behalf about the shelter code project. So he put into the chat her contact information. So if you want to get involved in that or have any concerns or questions, please contact Jenna Hughes about that. And then I think the city update, Lani has put into the chat the contacts for updates and alerts for state, county, and city. Remembering for those who may not know how to do it, but if you go to the chat, you go down to the end, you go to the ellipsis over to the right, the 3 dots, you can save the chat at the end. So all of this good information that's in there, you don't have to have had these written down. You can just print them out. The elections for new candidates in December, please consider, oh, I'm sorry, before that, the voters forum, get the word out for the September 9th event. Now to the elections, we're needing candidates, and so please consider that. And that will be in December. Eric then reiterated the deadlines that are regarding the voters forum. So the ballot's going out on the 1st. Questions are due by the 2nd. Please send your questions to Lani. There's a postcard that has gone out not only about the voters forum, but also about boards and commissions. So please consider that as well. Land use subcommittee has taken a break. Traffic calming has done a stellar job in going to the July 1st traffic commission meeting. The voting process has changed to 51%, which is awesome, as well as omitting the non-return equals a no vote, and they will disband unless they're further needed. And then there's a Highland project in addition, and that is the back to school traffic safety event and the matching grants. There's a tree planting grant that was Highland and La Strada. I'm pleased to say, I think it was Central Beaverton that kicked in for that. And that was a fabulous event that was in with the night market. So with that, I'm done.
All right. Anyone else have any last minute comments or questions? Oh, so good to see all of your faces. I'll see you next month. All right. Have a good evening. Good night.
Be safe.
Good night.
Wait, I wanted to ask, you know the thing that they sent us, it says sunscreen lipstick, lip something. Is that sunscreen or what is it?